Welcome to Silent Queen's Reckoning. I'm so glad you could join us today. Now let's dive right into the story.
Chapter 1. Natalie Mercer arrived at the divorce hearing with a newborn in her arms and hospital stitches still pulling beneath her coat. Across the courtroom, her billionaire husband sat beside his mistress. He did not stand. He did not ask about the baby. He only looked at the infant wrapped in a cream blanket, smiled coldly, and said loud enough for the front row to hear, "That child is not my problem anymore." The room went silent. Even the clerk stopped typing. Natalie held the baby closer to her chest. Her daughter made a tiny sound, a soft breath more than a cry, and turned her face toward the warmth of Natalie's collar. The newborn was 6 days old. 6 days old, and already being denied by the man whose last name sat on her birth certificate. Natalie was 34, with pale brown hair tucked into a loose knot, a face thinned by sleepless nights, and gray eyes that had once softened whenever her husband walked into a room. Today those eyes looked clear, and still. Too still. Her coat was navy wool, buttoned high to hide the hospital band she had not yet removed from her wrist. Her hands were steady around the baby, but her body was not. Every step from the courthouse entrance to the hearing room had sent pain through her abdomen. She had delivered by emergency surgery after 70 hours of stress, blood pressure spikes, and unanswered calls. Her husband, Damien Vale, had not been there. He had been at the St. Regis with Cassandra Bell. Now Cassandra sat beside him in a white suit, platinum hair falling over one shoulder, one hand resting lightly on his sleeve, as if the divorce hearing were a charity brunch, and she was the featured guest. She was beautiful in the expensive way cameras rewarded. Narrow waist, red mouth, diamonds at her ears, a smile that looked soft until it landed on another woman's wound. Natalie had seen that smile before, on magazine covers, in leaked dinner photos. In the elevator footage Damien insisted was business networking. The judge had not entered yet. Only the lawyers, the clerk, a court officer, and a few reporters approved for the high-profile civil schedule were present. Damien's divorce had become gossip, because he was not just rich. He was Damien Vale, founder of Vale Arc Systems, the man business channels called the King of Medical Artificial Intelligence. He had built an empire on predicting health crises. He had ignored every crisis inside his own home. Damien leaned back in his chair, dark hair perfectly styled, charcoal suit immaculate, face polished into public composure. He looked nothing like the man who had once cried in Natalie's lap when his first investor rejected him. He looked like a man waiting to win. "Natalie," her lawyer murmured beside her, "you do not have to respond." Natalie's lawyer, Elise Hart, was small, sharp-eyed, and dressed in black. She had spent the last 48 hours organizing documents, while Natalie fed a newborn with one hand and signed affidavits with the other. Natalie nodded once. She had not come to argue in the hallway. She had not come to beg a billionaire for mercy. She had not come to ask why he chose a mistress over a wife in labor. She had come because Damien insisted on finalizing the divorce today. He believed exhaustion would make her sign. He believed humiliation would make her fold. He believed the baby would make her look desperate. Cassandra leaned toward him, whispering something. Damien smiled. Natalie watched them. Then she looked down at her daughter. Her name was Rose. Natalie had chosen it alone in the hospital at 3:12 a.m., after the nurse asked for the third time whether the father would be arriving. Rose Evelyn Mercer Vale. A soft name for a child born into a room full of alarms. The courtroom doors opened. Judge Marianne Calder entered, silver-haired and unsmiling, robe moving like a dark wave behind her. "All rise." Natalie stood carefully. Damien rose with theatrical ease. Cassandra stood too, though no one had asked her to. Judge Calder took her seat, scanned the room, and paused when she saw the newborn. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Be seated." Everyone sat. Natalie lowered herself slowly, jaw tight against the pain. Judge Calder looked at Damien's table. "Mr. Vale, Why is Miss Bell seated with counsel? Damien's lead attorney, Theodore Crane, cleared his throat. Your Honor, Miss Bell is present as a communications consultant for Mr. Vele, given the public nature of these proceedings. Judge Calder's gaze moved to Cassandra. This is family court, not a press launch. A faint flush touched Cassandra's cheeks. Damien's mouth tightened. Natalie felt the smallest thread of satisfaction. The judge turned to Elise. Miss Hart, your client is present with the child? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Vele was discharged from hospital yesterday. She is here because opposing counsel refused a medical continuance. Judge Calder's eyes sharpened. Theodore Crane shifted in his seat. Damien did not. He smiled with practiced patience. Your Honor, he said, I have extended every courtesy for months. Mrs. Vale has delayed this divorce repeatedly. I believe today is about clarity. Natalie looked at him. Clarity. That was the word he chose, while his newborn slept against the woman he left bleeding in a maternity ward. Judge Calder folded her hands. Then let us begin with clarity. Chapter 2. 6 months earlier, Damien had told Natalie he wanted a divorce over breakfast. He said it between coffee and a stock alert. Natalie had been 7 months pregnant, standing beside the kitchen island in a faded robe, slicing pears because her nausea had returned, and fruit was one of the few things she could keep down. Damien did not look up from his phone. This marriage has become inefficient, he said. At first, Natalie thought she misheard. Outside, rain slid down the windows of their Boston brownstone. The house smelled of toast and pear skin. A tiny pair of knitted baby socks lay on the counter, sent by Natalie's friend from Seattle. What? She asked. Damien finally looked at her. His blue eyes were calm. That was the worst part. Not cruel, not angry, calm, as if discussing a software update. I want a divorce. The knife slipped in Natalie's hand. A thin red line opened across her thumb. Damien glanced at the blood and frowned. Be careful. She stared at him. That was Damien. He noticed the mess, not the wound. Why now? She asked. His expression flickered. Annoyance, relief, something harder. Because pretending is not good for either of us. Natalie pressed a napkin around her thumb. The baby shifted inside her, a small push beneath her ribs. Pretending? You know we have been disconnected for years. No, Damien, you have been absent for years. His jaw tightened. Do not make this dramatic. She laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because the sentence was so familiar it had become a wall between them. Do not make this dramatic. He said it when she asked why he came home after midnight. He said it when Cassandra Bell's name appeared on travel invoices. He said it when Natalie found a lipstick mark on his collar and he told her wealthy investors hugged in Europe. He said it when she called him from the obstetrician's office because the doctor wanted him to hear the risk warning. He had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Damien set his phone down. I will be generous. Natalie looked at him carefully. That phrase did not mean kindness. It meant he had already spoken to lawyers. What does generous mean? The brownstone for 1 year. Medical coverage through delivery, a settlement account, reasonable child support if paternity is established. The room narrowed. If paternity is established? Damien leaned back. Natalie. She felt cold move up her spine. You think the baby is not yours? I think emotions have been high. I think timelines should be confirmed. The baby moved again, this time harder. Natalie placed a hand over her stomach. Say what you mean. Damien's mouth hardened. I mean, I will not be trapped by a child if there is any uncertainty. There it was. Not doubt. Strategy. Natalie had known about Cassandra before Damien confessed the affair. She had known from the receipts, the silences, the sudden interest in cologne. She had known because wives often know before they are told, and the knowing becomes a private illness. But this was different. This was not betrayal. It was erasure. He wanted to erase the marriage, the pregnancy, and the life growing inside her, if it made his exit cleaner. That morning, Natalie did not throw the pear slices at him. She did not cry. She did not call Cassandra. She simply wrapped her bleeding thumb, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door. Damien thought she was collapsing. She was calling an attorney. A week later, Cassandra moved from rumor to public fact. She appeared beside Damien at a technology summit in Geneva, photographed in a black gown, her hand on his chest, both of them laughing as if consequences were for other people. When reporters asked about Natalie, Damien's office released a statement. Mr. and Mrs. Vale have been privately separated for some time and remain committed to an amicable transition. Privately separated. Natalie read the statement while sitting in the nursery, surrounded by unopened boxes and a crib Damien had never assembled. She had never agreed to those words. But Damien owned the company, the press team, the narrative. Or so he thought. Chapter 3 Natalie had a secret Damien never bothered to discover. She was not poor. She was not helpless. She was not the quiet middle-class wife he rescued from obscurity, though he had allowed people to believe that for years. Before she married Damien Vale, she had been Natalie Mercer, only granddaughter of Evelyn Mercer, founder of Mercer House, a private charitable trust that owned hospitals, research labs, real estate, and one very quiet investment fund. Damien knew pieces. He knew Natalie's grandmother had been comfortable. He knew she inherited some family assets. He knew she donated quietly to maternal health clinics and refused to attend flashy donor galas. He did not know Mercer House had been the earliest institutional backer of Valiark Systems. He did not know the medical data partnerships that made his company valuable were negotiated through clinics Mercer House controlled. He did not know the brownstone he called his marital home had been purchased through Natalie's family trust years before the wedding. He did not know because Natalie had not wanted to marry a man who loved her balance sheet. And because Damien, for all his intelligence, had only ever investigated things that increased his valuation. Natalie had loved him when he was not yet important. She met him at a hospital fundraiser 9 years earlier. He was 31, brilliant, intense, almost frighteningly focused. He spoke about using predictive software to identify sepsis before doctors could see it. His suit was inexpensive. His shoes were polished but worn at the sole. He had no patience for small talk, which Natalie found refreshing. When a donor dismissed his pitch as, quote, clever but impractical, Natalie watched Damien smile politely, walk into the hallway, and put one fist against the wall, breathing like a man swallowing humiliation. She followed him. You need clinical partners more than donors, she said. He turned. Excuse me? Money follows proof. Proof follows access. He stared at her. Then he smiled. Not the smooth billionaire smile he would later perfect. A real one, startled and alive. Who are you? He asked. At the time, Natalie thought the question was charming. Years later, she understood he had never truly asked it again. She helped him quietly, introduced him to administrators, explained grant structures, connected him to a data ethics board. When Mercer House invested through a shell fund, she kept her name out of it. Damien thought he had won over anonymous capital. Natalie thought she was protecting their marriage from power imbalance. Love makes intelligent women do foolish arithmetic. It teaches them to subtract themselves and call the result devotion. Now, in Judge Calder's courtroom, Natalie sat with Rose in her arms and listened as Damien's attorney presented a divorce proposal that treated her like an inconvenience. The proposed settlement provides Mrs. Vale with temporary housing access, 6 months of transition support, and medical coverage, Theodore Crane said. Elise Hart's expression did not move. Judge Calder looked down at the document. Temporary housing access to the marital residence? Yes, Your Honor, and paternity. Mr. Vale requests independent testing before any acknowledgement of child support or custodial obligation. Natalie felt Rose stir. A soft whimper rose from the blanket. Damien looked away. Cassandra did not. She looked at the baby with an expression Natalie could only describe as irritation, as if Rose had shown up late to steal attention. Judge Calder looked at Damien. Mr. Vale, you are listed on the birth certificate? Yes, but under pressure. Natalie's fingers tightened around the blanket. Elise touched her wrist lightly. Not yet. The judge's brows rose. Under pressure? Damien leaned forward. adopting the voice he used in interviews when discussing difficult ethical questions. My wife was in a vulnerable state after delivery. I did not want to create conflict at the hospital. I signed what the staff placed in front of me. Natalie stared at him. He had not signed at the hospital. He had not been there. Elise opened a folder. Judge Calder noticed. Miss Hart? We will address that later, Your Honor. Damien's eyes flicked toward Natalie's table. For the first time that morning, uncertainty crossed his face. Not guilt, not shame. Concern for the script. Chapter 4. Cassandra Bell enjoyed being seen. That was why she chose the seat beside Damien instead of waiting outside like any sensible communications consultant. She wanted the reporters to catch the angle. Billionaire husband, composed mistress, abandoned wife with newborn. Cassandra understood images. Her career had been built on them. She had been a lifestyle anchor before joining Vailark as head of brand strategy. She knew how to tilt her chin, lower her voice, and turn scandal into sympathy. She did not think of herself as a homewrecker. That was an ugly word used by women who failed to keep men interested. Cassandra preferred future wife. She believed she had earned it. Natalie looked tired. That helped. The newborn helped too, though not in the way Natalie probably hoped. A crying infant in court made a woman seem chaotic, emotional, unable to manage her life. Cassandra had told Damien that. She will bring the baby, Cassandra said in the car that morning. Let her. It makes her look desperate. Damien had been silent. Cassandra squeezed his hand. Do not soften now. I am not softening. She will use the child to pull you back. She cannot. Good. Cassandra leaned closer. Because after today, we control the narrative. Damien liked that phrase. Control the narrative. Men with secrets always did. Now in court, Cassandra watched Natalie's lawyer arrange documents with irritating calm. Something about Elise Hart bothered her. The woman looked too prepared. A court officer stepped near Cassandra's chair. Miss Bell, Judge Calder has requested you sit behind counsel, not beside Mr. Vale. Cassandra blinked. Damien turned. She is with my team. The officer's face remained neutral. The judge has ruled. Cassandra rose slowly. The reporters noticed. Of course they noticed. Her heels clicked once as she moved to the row behind Damien. Natalie did not look at her. That annoyed Cassandra more than any insult. She wanted tears, anger, a trembling voice. She wanted proof that she mattered enough to wound. Natalie only adjusted the blanket around the baby. Judge Calder reviewed the settlement proposal. Mr. Vale, have you had sufficient time to review this? Natalie looked up. Her voice was quiet, slightly rough from exhaustion. Yes, Your Honor. Do you agree to the terms? No. The single word seemed to surprise Damien. He turned toward her. Natalie. The judge looked over her glasses. Mr. Vale, you will not address her directly. Natalie continued. I do not agree to temporary access to a home I own. I do not agree to transitional support from accounts funded through assets he does not control. I do not agree to paternity testing framed as suspicion when the prenatal test was completed by court-admissible lab protocol 8 weeks ago. And I do not agree to be called separated for months when hospital, travel, and residence records show Mr. Vale continued living with me until he moved into Ms. Bell's hotel suite. A silence fell. Damien's mouth opened slightly. Cassandra froze behind him. Theodore Crane stood. Your Honor, these claims are unexpected and unsupported. Elise Hart rose with the ease of someone who had been waiting. They are supported, Your Honor. We have the exhibits. Judge Calder looked at Natalie. For the first time, the faintest shift crossed her face. Interest. Proceed carefully, Miss Hart. Elise nodded. Of course. She placed the first document on the evidence monitor. A property deed. The brownstone title, owner, Mercer House Residential Trust. Acquisition date, 2 years before marriage. Judge Calder read it. Damien's face changed. Only slightly, but Natalie saw it. He had always called it their house. Then his house. Now, for the first time, he seemed to wonder whose door he had been walking through. Chapter 5, Theodore Crane requested a recess. Judge Calder denied it. The petitioner demanded this hearing pursued today despite medical circumstances, she said. We will proceed. Natalie lowered her eyes to hide the emotion that rose too quickly. Not victory. Relief. For months, Damien had used time like a weapon. Delays when he wanted leverage. Urgency when he thought Natalie was weak. He forced the hearing 6 days after delivery because he believed a recovering woman would sign anything to go home. But the home was hers. The first reversal had landed. Elise moved to the second exhibit. Hospital call logs. Not one page, several. Your Honor, Elise said. Mr. Vale represented that he signed the birth certificate under pressure at the hospital. The hospital visitor logs show he was not present during delivery, emergency surgery, or the first 48 hours of the child's life. Damien stood halfway. I was not notified in time. Elise clicked once. The screen changed. Text messages. Natalie. My blood pressure is high. Doctor wants you here. Natalie. They are moving me to surgery. Natalie, Damien, please answer. Natalie, she is here. Natalie. Her name is Rose. Below them, delivery receipts. All sent. All delivered. Then a second column. Hotel invoice. St. Regis. Presidential suite. Damien Vale and Cassandra Bell. Same dates. The courtroom air tightened. Cassandra's face went white. Damien stared at the screen. Natalie did not. She looked at Rose. Her daughter slept through the evidence of her father's absence. Tiny mouth parted, one fist curled near her cheek. Judge Calder's voice was low. Mr. Vale, were you at the St. Regis during the delivery? Damien sat slowly. My attorney can address that. No, the judge said. You can address it. He swallowed. I was managing an urgent business matter. Behind him, Cassandra looked down at her hands. Elise clicked again. A photograph appeared. Damien and Cassandra leaving the hotel restaurant the night Rose was born. Cassandra wore a red dress. Damien's hand rested on her lower back. Both were smiling. A reporter in the back row inhaled sharply. The judge looked at Theodore Crane. Counsel, control your client before he worsens his position. Crane looked as if he wanted to vanish. Elise moved on. The paternity issue. Damien's jaw tightened. This is unnecessary, he said. Natalie finally looked at him. His eyes met hers for a second, then slipped away. Elise placed a sealed lab report on the monitor. Non-invasive prenatal paternity test conducted with chain of custody documentation. Mr. Val provided his sample voluntarily through Dr. Anika Shaw's office after signing consent forms. The judge read the summary. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. The room stilled. Damien's face turned a strange gray. Cassandra leaned forward. You told me that test was inconclusive, she whispered. Damien did not turn. Natalie watched Cassandra understand the first private betrayal inside the public one. It did not make Cassandra innocent. It made her useful. Judge Calder's expression was unreadable. Mr. Vale, you had this result? Damien's lawyer stood. Your Honor, there are issues concerning its admissibility. Sit down, Mr. Crane. He sat. The judge looked at Damien. You had this result? Damien's mouth moved. Yes. The word was quiet. Natalie felt something loosen in her chest. For weeks he had made her carry the insult that Rose might not be his. He had let the press speculate. He had let Cassandra smirk. He had let Natalie walk into court with a newborn under a cloud he knew was false. Now the cloud had a name. Cruelty. Chapter 6. Cassandra Bell had not expected to be betrayed by the man she stole. That was the thing about mistresses who believed themselves strategic. They often forgot that a man willing to lie to his wife has already practiced lying to women who love him. She sat behind Damien, body rigid, face carefully blank. But her hand shook around her phone. Natalie noticed. So did Elise. The next exhibit turned the case from divorce into something sharper: financial records. Mercer House Medical Data Partnership. Valark Systems Licensing Agreement. Amendment signed 4 years earlier. Protective clause: founder misconduct, fraud, reputational harm, or violation of patient ethics triggers immediate review and possible suspension of data access. Judge Calder scanned the documents. These relate to corporate matters? Elise nodded. They relate to marital assets, income valuation, and misrepresentations in the proposed settlement. Damien's head snapped toward Natalie. There it was. Fear. He could deny fatherhood. He could abandon delivery. He could call Natalie unstable. But Valark's data pipeline was the heart of his empire. Without the Mercer Clinical Network, his flagship predictive engine lost its largest validated dataset. His valuation would not collapse overnight. It would bleed, and billionaires fear slow bleeding more than fire. Elise continued. Mr. Vale's settlement proposal values his equity using restricted projections, while omitting a pending review of the Mercer clinical licensing agreements. He also failed to disclose that those agreements are controlled by entities associated with Mrs. Vale's family trust. Theodore Crane looked at Damien. Not angry. Stunned. You did not disclose this to us, he muttered. Damien's lips tightened. Natalie saw the calculation in his eyes. How much did she know? How long had she known? The answer was simple. Long enough. Natalie had not planned to use Mercer House against him when the marriage first broke. She wanted a clean divorce, stable custody, and a quiet life for Rose. She wanted Damien to be less cruel than he had become. Then he ignored the birth. Then he denied the child. Then he sat with Cassandra in court. That morning, Mercy left quietly. Judge Calder looked at Natalie. Mistress Vale, are you the controlling beneficiary of Mercer House? The room seemed to lean in. Damien stared at her. Cassandra lifted her head. Natalie adjusted Rose in her arms and answered evenly. Yes, Your Honor. A whisper ran through the back of the courtroom. Damien's eyes fixed on her face. You told me it was a charity, he said before he could stop himself. Judge Calder snapped. Mr. Vale. Natalie answered anyway. It is. Her voice remained soft. It is also a trust, a hospital network, a real estate holder, a research fund, and the reason your company had enough clinical access to become valuable. Damien looked as if she had struck him. That almost made Natalie laugh. He could abandon a wife in labor. He could deny a newborn. He could bring his mistress to court. But discovering his wife owned leverage was the injury that shocked him. Cassandra whispered, Damien, is this true? He did not answer. He could not. Because if he said yes, he admitted he had hidden material facts from his mistress, his lawyers, and likely his investors. If he said no, the documents would answer for him. Elise moved to the last folder. Your Honor, in addition to custody and support matters, we request immediate preservation orders over marital communications, corporate compensation disclosures, and any public statements issued by Mr. Vale or Miss Bell regarding Mrs. Vale's alleged separation, paternity uncertainty, or fitness as a parent. Damien's face hardened. Fitness? Elise turned to him. You called my client emotionally unstable in your draft custody memorandum. Natalie felt her stomach twist. She had not seen that document yet. Elise had. Judge Calder's expression darkened. Elise placed the memorandum on the monitor. There it was. Damien's custody argument. Natalie Vale is emotionally volatile, socially isolated, financially dependent, and currently attempting to use a newborn child as leverage against Mr. Vale. The room blurred for half a second. Natalie looked down at Rose, breathing through the pain. Financially dependent. He had written that while living in her house, using her medical network, and building his fortune on her family's quiet backing. Cassandra's chair creaked. She had moved away from Damien by an inch. Not much. Enough. Chapter 7. Judge Calder called a recess after 2 hours, not because Damien needed it. Because Rose did. Natalie carried her daughter to a private consultation room provided by the court. Elise followed with a diaper bag, formula samples, legal folders, and the expression of a woman who had just watched a powerful man discover gravity. The door closed. Natalie sat carefully, wincing as her stitches pulled. Elise set the files down. You held up well. Natalie looked at her daughter. I almost broke when the hotel photo came up. But you did not. I wanted him to look at her. Elise softened. Natalie touched Rose's cheek with one finger. He did not look at her once. The room was plain. Beige walls, a conference table, fluorescent lights, a framed poster about mediation. Nothing in it should have felt sacred. But for Natalie, that small courtroom became the first place in days where she could breathe. Rose woke and began to fuss. Natalie fed her slowly, one hand under the tiny head, the other adjusting the bottle. Her wrists ached. Her eyelids burned. She was so tired she could feel exhaustion behind her teeth. Still, her mind stayed clear. "Has Mercer House sent notice?" she asked. Elise checked her phone. "Yes. The Clinical Data Ethics Committee has initiated review. Valark receives formal notice at noon." Natalie nodded. "What about the press statement?" "Ready, but not released. Your call." Natalie looked at the closed door. Outside, Damien was probably yelling at Theodore Crane. Cassandra was probably calling her publicist. Reporters were probably already writing headlines. Billionaire denied child despite paternity test. Mistress attended divorce hearing. Wife revealed as Mercer House heiress. A different woman might have felt satisfaction. Natalie felt tired, but tired was not the same as weak. A knock sounded. Elise opened the door slightly. A court officer stood outside. "Mrs. Vale, Miss Bell is requesting to speak with you." Elise's answer was immediate. "No." Natalie looked up. "Let her in, Natalie. She is not the danger. She is the mirror." Elise hesitated, then stepped aside. Cassandra entered without her earlier glow. Her white suit still fit perfectly, but something about her posture had collapsed. The diamonds looked less like luxury now and more like borrowed armor. She glanced at the baby. This time, no irritation crossed her face, only uncertainty. Natalie did not invite her to sit. Cassandra folded her arms. "Did you know about the paternity test before today?" "Yes." "Why did you let him keep saying it?" Natalie's eyes lifted. "Because I needed him to say it where it mattered." Cassandra swallowed. "You used the hearing. I used the truth. He told me the baby might not be his. I know. He told me you trapped him. I know. He told me you had no money." Natalie almost smiled. "Yes, that one seems popular today." Cassandra's mouth tightened. For the first time, she looked less like a villain and more like a woman calculating the cost of believing a liar, because the lie benefited her. "I did not know about the hospital," Cassandra said. Natalie's expression did not change. "You knew he was married." Cassandra flinched. "You knew I was pregnant." Another flinch. "You came here and sat beside him while he tried to erase his daughter." "Do not ask me to comfort you," because he lied selectively. Cassandra looked at Rose again. The baby's small hand opened against the blanket. Cassandra's voice lowered. "He said you would take everything from him." Natalie adjusted the bottle. "No. He handed me everything when he confused cruelty with strategy." The words seemed to land somewhere Cassandra had no defense for. She looked toward the door. "He has emails," she said suddenly. Elise straightened. Natalie went still. Cassandra met her eyes. "Draft statements. Custody talking points. Messages to me. He planned to leak that you had postpartum instability if you refused the settlement. He asked me to find a friendly producer." The room changed. Elise stepped closer. "Do you have access?" Cassandra's jaw tightened. "I have screenshots." "Why offer them?" Cassandra looked at Natalie. "Because he had the paternity test. And lied to me too." Natalie studied her. There was no trust between them. There would never be. But truth did not always arrive through clean hands. "Send them to Miss Hart," Natalie said. Cassandra nodded. At the door, she paused. "For what it is worth," she said, voice barely audible, "she is beautiful." Natalie looked down at Rose. "Yes," she said. "She is." Cassandra left. Elise closed the door. Then she smiled for the first time all day. "That," she said, "is going to hurt him." Natalie leaned back, exhausted. "No," she said. "That is going to protect my daughter." Chapter 8. When court resumed, Damien had changed. The polish remained. The suit, the hair, the billionaire posture. but his eyes had sharpened into something dangerous. A man losing control often calls it being attacked. He stood before Judge Calder with his lawyer beside him and tried one last performance. "Your Honor," he said, "this has become a coordinated ambush. Mrs. Vale concealed her financial identity throughout the marriage, allowed me to believe certain assets were shared, and is now weaponizing both the child and her family trust against me." Natalie sat very still. Elise did not object. "Sometimes the best thing to do was let a man keep speaking," Damien continued, voice gaining force. "I am willing to provide support. I am willing to co-parent if paternity is confirmed through a neutral process. But I will not be financially extorted by a woman who pretended to be someone else for years." Judge Calder's face showed nothing. "Are you finished?" Damien hesitated. "Yes." Elise stood. "Your Honor, we have received additional materials from Miss Bell." Theodore Crane closed his eyes. Damien turned slowly toward Cassandra. She sat in the back row now, no longer behind him. Her face was pale, but she did not look away. Elise placed the screenshots on the monitor. Damien to Cassandra. "If Natalie refuses settlement, we shift narrative to instability." Damien to Cassandra. "Producer at Northlight owes me. Push postpartum concern, financial dependence, possible paternity question." Cassandra to Damien. "What if the test comes up?" Damien to Cassandra. "It stays buried unless useful." The courtroom seemed to shrink around him. Judge Calder read every line. When she looked up, her voice was quiet. "Mr. Vale, did you plan to publicly question your wife's mental stability after childbirth despite possessing paternity results and while absent from the delivery?" Damien said nothing. His lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client will not answer without consultation." "That may be wise," Judge Calder said. Natalie looked at Damien. For months, she had feared the public narrative. She imagined headlines, anonymous comments, polished panels discussing whether motherhood had made her unstable. Damien had counted on that fear. Now his own messages sat under court lights. Fear changed sides. Judge Calder made temporary orders that afternoon. Rose was legally recognized as Damien's child pending no further dispute, unless he chose to challenge the existing test through a court-approved process at his own expense. Natalie received temporary sole physical custody. Damien's visitation would be supervised until the court reviewed his conduct surrounding the birth and attempted media manipulation. The brownstone was confirmed as non-marital trust property pending final determination. Damien was barred from entering it. Both parties were ordered not to make defamatory public statements. Financial discovery expanded. Corporate compensation and trust-linked licensing agreements would be reviewed for accurate valuation. Each order landed like a door closing. Damien's expression darkened with every one. At the end, Judge Calder looked at Natalie. "Mistress Vale, given your medical status, you are excused from further appearance today. Future scheduling will accommodate your recovery and the child's needs." Natalie swallowed. "Thank you, Your Honor." She stood carefully, Rose in her arms. Damien stood too. "Natalie." The court officer moved. Judge Calder's voice snapped across the room. "Mr. Vale, do not address her." Damien stopped. Natalie did not look back until she reached the door. Then she turned. For 1 second, they faced each other across the courtroom. He looked furious, wounded, cornered. But beneath it all was disbelief. Not disbelief that he had hurt her. Disbelief that she had stopped absorbing it privately. Natalie held Rose closer and walked out. The reporters followed, but Elise stepped forward with a short, prepared statement. "Mrs. Vale is focused on her newborn daughter, her recovery, and the lawful resolution of these proceedings. She asks for privacy and will not litigate her child's life in the media." A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Vale, did your husband know the baby was his?" Natalie paused. Elise touched her arm. Natalie did not answer. She did not need to. The court record had already spoken. Chapter 9. The fallout did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like canceled meetings. That was worse. By evening, Vale Ark's board requested an emergency session. By midnight, Mercer House issued formal notice that its clinical data partnership was under ethical review due to conduct concerns involving the founder. By morning, 2 investors asked whether Damien's settlement disclosures had misrepresented marital exposure. By noon, a business channel ran a segment titled "The Private Trust Behind Valark." Damien watched it from his office, jaw clenched so tightly his temple throbbed. On screen, an analyst explained what he had failed to understand. Mercer House was not a small charity. It owned a network of maternal health clinics, pediatric research centers, long-term care facilities, and one of the largest private medical datasets in the country. Valark's early clinical validation relied heavily on access negotiated through Mercer-associated entities. Damien muted the television. He had built the model. He had written the code. He had raised capital. He had done the interviews. But Natalie had opened doors he once thought opened because he deserved them. That was the part he could not forgive. Not her evidence. Not the paternity report. Not even the trust. He could not forgive the possibility that his legend had been co-authored by the woman he tried to discard. His office door opened. Cassandra walked in without permission. She had changed into a black coat. No diamonds. No camera smile. "You sent my messages to her lawyer," Damien said. "You lied about the test. You knew enough. I knew what you sold me." He laughed sharply. "Do not pretend you are innocent. I am not." That stopped him. Cassandra's voice was flat. "I knew you were married. I knew she was pregnant. I knew I was taking a public place that belonged to someone else. I can live with ugly truths when they are mine. But you made me part of a smear campaign against a newborn's mother while hiding that the child was yours." Damien stared at her. "I was protecting us. You were protecting yourself." He stepped closer. "Careful." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, but it was not the old smile. "You used to say Natalie was too quiet to survive your world." Damien's eyes narrowed. Cassandra turned toward the door. "She survived you. That is probably worse." She left. Damien stood alone in his office. For the first time in years, no one came after him. 2 weeks later, the board placed him on temporary leave pending review of disclosure issues, media manipulation, and potential exposure from the Mercer House partnership. It was not removal, not yet. Boards rarely killed kings in one swing. They preferred formal language, temporary leave, independent review, governance support. Damien understood every phrase. They were washing his fingerprints off the walls. Meanwhile, Natalie returned to the brownstone, not as a wife waiting, as the owner. She came home with Rose on a cold afternoon. Elise carried legal folders. A nurse carried a small bag of medication and postnatal supplies. The nursery smelled faintly of lavender and new wood. The crib was still unassembled. Natalie stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she laughed softly. Elise looked at her. "What?" "I kept waiting for him to build it." "Do you want me to call someone?" Natalie looked down at Rose. "No. I will." She called a local carpenter, who arrived the next morning. A kind older woman named June, who assembled the crib, tightened the rocking chair bolts, and asked no questions when Natalie cried quietly near the window. That night, Rose slept in her crib for the first time. Natalie sat beside her, listening to the small, steady breaths. For months, she had thought the worst thing Damien could do was leave. Now she understood the worst thing would have been staying with a man who made abandonment feel like love. Chapter 10. The final divorce hearing took place 4 months later. Natalie arrived without Rose. That was deliberate. Her daughter did not need to be decoration in her father's reckoning. This time, Natalie wore a charcoal dress, low heels, and a cream coat. Her hair was cut shorter now, brushing her jaw in soft waves. She looked healthier, not untouched, stronger in the way repaired things sometimes are, with the brake line still visible but sealed. Damien arrived alone. The absence of Cassandra was noted by everyone. He looked thinner. His suit was still perfect, but the glow had gone out of him. Business press had turned cold. The board had not removed him entirely, but Valark now operated with a governance chair appointed under investor pressure. Mercer House had renewed limited clinical access only after strict ethics oversight and Damien's removal from direct partnership authority. He remained wealthy, but no longer absolute. That mattered. Men like Damien could survive losing money. Losing unquestioned power was harder. The settlement had changed completely. Natalie kept the brownstone. Mercer assets stayed separate. Rose received a protected support trust funded by Damien and supervised by court order. Custody remained primarily with Natalie, with Damien granted structured visitation after parenting review. No public paternity denial, no media attacks, no claim of financial dependence. Theodore Crane no longer represented Damien. His new lawyer was quieter and far more careful. When the judge asked whether both parties understood the agreement, Natalie said yes. Damien hesitated. Then he said yes too. After the decree was entered, Judge Calder addressed them briefly. This court cannot repair the harm done between adults. It can only make orders that protect the child and recognize the law. I hope both parties understand that a child is not a strategy. Natalie felt those words settle over the room. Damien looked down. When court ended, he approached her in the hallway. Elise moved to block him, but Natalie shook her head. He stopped a few feet away. No cameras were nearby. No Cassandra. No lawyers leaning in. Only the echo of courthouse shoes and a vending machine humming near the elevators. "How is she?" Damien asked. Natalie studied him. It was the first time he had asked about Rose without an audience. "She is healthy." His throat moved. "Does she look like me?" The question came out small. Natalie could have punished him with the answer. She could have said he had no right. She could have reminded him of the St. Regis, the paternity denial, the draft smear campaign. Instead, she told the truth. Sometimes, when she frowns. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, then vanished. "Natalie." "No." He closed his mouth. She had not raised her voice. She did not need to. "I am not here for an apology," she said. "And I am not here to help you feel like the kind of man who deserves one." His eyes reddened. "I made mistakes." She looked at him, then really looked. "Damien, mistakes are missed appointments. Mistakes are forgotten calls. You built a campaign to erase your wife and doubt your daughter because it made your affair easier to sell." He flinched. "You are right," he whispered. The words surprised her, but they did not change anything. "I know," she said. The elevator arrived. Natalie stepped inside. Damien remained in the hallway. Just before the doors closed, he asked, "Will she know me?" Natalie held his gaze. "That depends on who you become when no one is watching." The doors closed between them. Chapter 11. 1 year later. Natalie stood in a Mercer House clinic, holding Rose on her hip, while a nurse showed her the new postpartum support wing. The hallway walls were painted soft green. Sunlight came through wide windows. A mother sat in a rocking chair near the lactation room, eyes closed while her baby slept against her chest. Down the corridor, a counselor spoke quietly with a woman holding a folder of court documents. Natalie paused outside a small plaque. The Rose Mercer Family Advocacy Center. Her daughter grabbed at the edge of the plaque with one chubby hand. "No," Natalie said gently, smiling as she shifted Rose higher. "That is not for eating." Rose babbled in protest. Natalie laughed. The sound surprised her sometimes. How easily it came now. Not every day. Not without shadows. But often enough to feel real. Elise Hart joined her near the entrance, holding 2 coffees. "Opening ceremony starts in 10 minutes. Natalie took one. "Any press questions I should avoid?" "All of them." "That seems ambitious." "You hired me for ambition." Natalie smiled. The Advocacy Center had been built for women whose partners used money, status, media, or legal threats to trap them. It offered emergency legal support, postpartum mental health care, custody guidance, digital evidence preservation, and safe transportation from hospitals to court when necessary. Natalie insisted on that last part. No woman should have to walk into a divorce hearing 6 days after birth because a powerful man refused mercy. At the small ceremony, Natalie stood at a podium with Rose asleep in a carrier against her chest. She looked out at doctors, nurses, lawyers, donors, and several women who had already used the center's services. Some held babies, Some held hands. Some stood alone with their shoulders squared against memories no one else could see. Natalie spoke without notes. When my daughter was born, I believed the story of her first week would always be about abandonment, she said. The room quieted. I thought it would be about a man who did not answer. A hearing I was forced to attend. A lie told about her before she could even open her eyes. She touched Rose's back. But stories do not belong forever to the people who hurt us. They belong to the people who survive clearly enough to tell the truth. Elise lowered her eyes. Natalie continued. For a long time I confused privacy with dignity. I thought staying silent made me strong. Sometimes silence is strength, sometimes it is strategy. But sometimes silence protects the wrong person. A woman in the second row began to cry softly. Natalie's voice remained steady. This center exists because no mother should have to choose between recovery and legal protection. No child should become a weapon in an adult's reputation war. And no woman should be called unstable because she finally brings evidence into a room where lies have been comfortable. The applause began slowly, then filled the hall. Rose woke halfway through it and blinked at the lights, unimpressed. Natalie kissed the top of her head. Later, after the ribbon was cut and the donors moved toward the reception, Natalie stepped into the quiet nursery room at the end of the hall. She sat in a rocking chair by the window, feeding Rose while winter sunlight warmed the floor. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Damien, seated at a supervised visitation center, holding a wooden toy. The message below came from the court-appointed coordinator. Mr. Vale completed parenting session 12. He asked that you be informed he arrived early. Natalie looked at the photo for a long time. There was no rush of forgiveness, no romantic ache, no desire to rewrite the past. Only a measured, cautious hope that perhaps Rose would know a father better than the husband Natalie had known. She saved the message for the custody file. Then she put the phone away. Rose finished feeding and fell asleep against her. Natalie rocked her gently. Outside the window, snow began to fall over the clinic courtyard, soft and silent, covering the benches, the path, the bare branches of the young trees. Natalie thought of the courtroom. Damien beside Cassandra, the sentence that had split the room. That child is not my problem anymore. She looked down at her daughter and understood the final truth. Rose had never been the problem. Rose had been the witness. The proof that love could survive betrayal without returning to it. The proof that a woman could be tired, stitched, humiliated, and still walk into a room carrying the one thing her enemies had underestimated most. A future. Natalie closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel erased. She felt written back into her own life, one clear line at a time. Chapter 12. 2 years later, Rose learned to say no before she learned to say her father's name. Natalie considered that a good sign. The little girl said it to peas, socks, bedtime, and one unfortunate golden retriever who wanted her cracker. She said it with her whole body, chin tucked, curls bouncing, one hand lifted like a tiny judge issuing a ruling. Natalie never corrected the force of it. She only taught context. No is a strong word, she told her. Use it when you mean it. Rose always meant it. On a bright spring morning, Natalie brought her to the garden behind the Mercer House Clinic. The Advocacy Center was hosting its second annual gathering. Not a gala, not a fundraiser wrapped in diamonds, but a day of food, music, legal workshops, and quiet celebration for women who had made it to the other side of something. Rose wore a yellow dress and carried a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Natalie wore a simple white blouse and trousers, her hair loose around her shoulders. She no longer dressed to look harmless. She dressed for comfort, authority, and herself. Elise waved from a table near the entrance. Dr. Annika Shaw stood beside a group of nurses. Judge Calder had sent a handwritten note, formal and kind. Even Cassandra Bell had, through her attorney, made a donation under her own name to the Evidence Preservation Fund. Natalie did not know what to feel about that, so she felt nothing dramatic. That, too, was freedom. Damien arrived at noon for his scheduled hour with Rose. He came alone, as required, wearing a pale blue shirt and carrying a children's book. He looked older now, less glossy, more careful. Rose ran to him without hesitation. Up, she demanded. He looked at Natalie for permission. Natalie nodded. Damien picked Rose up, and for one brief moment his face folded with emotion so raw that Natalie looked away to give him privacy. He had not become a hero. Life was not that neat. But he had become a man who showed up on time, followed court orders, attended parenting sessions, and never again questioned his daughter's place in the world. That was not redemption. It was responsibility. Natalie had learned not to confuse the two. After Damien left, Elise joined Natalie by the garden wall. You okay? Natalie watched Rose chase bubbles near the fountain. Yes. Really? Natalie smiled. Really. Elise handed her a folded program. On the back was the center's motto, printed in dark green. Bring the evidence. Keep the child. Reclaim the story. Natalie traced the words with her thumb. Once, she had believed stories were told by the loudest person in the room. Damien had been loud in every way that counted. Money, press, reputation, certainty. Cassandra had been loud too, with beauty, proximity, and the confidence of a woman sitting in another woman's chair. Natalie had walked in quiet, with a newborn, with stitches, with documents, with truth. And the room had changed. Not because she shouted, because she had finally stopped letting silence serve the liar. Rose toddled back toward her, cheeks flushed, rabbit dragging through the grass. Mommy, she announced, holding up a broken flower stem. Fix. Natalie crouched and took the stem. Some things could be fixed, some could not. Knowing the difference had taken her longer than she liked. She tucked the flower behind Rose's ear. There, she said. Rose touched it and grinned. Natalie lifted her daughter into her arms and stood in the spring light, surrounded by women, children, nurses, lawyers, and the steady hum of lives continuing after the worst day did not win. She thought again of that title the newspapers had used after the first hearing. Billionaire left shocked as wife reveals hidden power in divorce court. They had misunderstood the shock. Damien was not shocked because Natalie had power. He was shocked because she used it after years of hiding it for his comfort. Natalie would never make that mistake again. She kissed Rose's cheek. The child laughed, bright and fearless. And in that sound, Natalie heard the life she had fought for. Not revenge, not victory over a man. Something better. A home where no one had to beg to be believed. Subscribe for more emotional stories about betrayal, hidden strength, and justice, served with evidence, dignity, and power.